So the agenda for this talk will be this very brief introduction. It's not going to take long because we have a lot of material, and we have a number of presenters here who have volunteered, members of our group, all of them, to talk. Jose is going to start off with his presentation on ChatGPT, which is quite all-encompassing from a very high level. Dave is going to get after that, and these will all be relatively short. Dave is going to show us a lot. He has a number of examples he did, and they do touch very much on trading. It's prompt engineering is what it's called. And then I am going to come back and do a little more detailed expose or a talk on how to get started with the API. And I found some good examples on the web, and I'm just going to point you to some of them. Then Prakash has also volunteered to talk on some very more global topics. There's been a lot of debate and discussion of whether there are tremendous ethical risks in AI as it's presently headed. There have been proposals for suspensions for holds on AI research beyond a certain point in certain areas. And he'll discuss the overall evolution of AI. Now, we'll have some questions, room for some questions along the way. We're going to have to try and keep to some degree of a schedule, but we'll leave it up to the individual presenters to decide how much they can include interaction. We will try for general discussion and Q&A at the end. We don't have a really hard stop, but realize some people have to run, so we'll try and keep it within reasonable bounds. So with that, I am going to pass. John, could you change the screen to Jose, please?
We're going to start with what is ChatGPT. The co-founder and the chief scientist of OpenAI, who is responsible for most of the great developments in artificial intelligence over the last decade and has literally hundreds of citations, describes it as a neural network being a certain that can program itself. It's a circuit with hundreds of billions of parameters that optimizes itself via gradient descent. I got a message about the sound. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, it did cut out for a second, but you're back.
So again, it is a parallel computer that can program itself, and you can see the immense power of having a circuit that has hundreds of billions of parameters being able to optimize itself. So the possibilities are practically unlimited. However, a different point of view, slightly, is the one by Professor Russell at Berkeley, saying that we know less about how ChatGPT-4 functions, and mainly he's here addressing the goals that are inside the black box that is ChatGPT than we know about the human brain. And we know very little about the human brain. So what can ChatGPT do? Well, here we have in blue what ChatGPT 3.5 can do, which is what you get standard if you go to the OpenAI website. ChatGPT 4 has more latency. And if you're working with APIs, the standard API is the one for ChatGPT 3.5. To get the API for ChatGPT 4, you have to go on a waiting list. You see on the horizontal that it can do better than an average human in a lot of tests, including writing microeconomic, advanced placement biology, well, history. Most interestingly, it can do better than the average human on the SAT math. I say that that's very interesting because this is a large language model where nobody has programmed anything that had to do with mathematics. There are no rules. It turns out that the large language model learned mathematics by itself by being exposed to a huge amount of data. And that, if you want, may be surprising. Yet, from the point of view of mathematics, it still has limitations because, for example, on the left, we can see that the advanced placement calculus 3.5 cannot do at all, and GPT-4 can do practically at the average level. Same for the mathematical Olympiad test, for example, where ChatGPT 3.5 doesn't do very well, and ChatGPT 4 is at the average level. But for things like advanced placement of chemistry, physics, statistics, and anything that has to do with language, certainly ChatGPT 4 does extremely well, and it's actually to a surprising point. Now, let's talk about hallucinations. What are hallucinations? This is defined as when the machine generates seemingly realistic responses that do not correspond to our real world. What this means, for example, if you ask even ChatGPT 4, which is the more advanced system, to come up with citations, you have to be very careful because it's like you're dealing with a person that has a foggy memory, and it recalls that maybe a certain author works, let's say, in a given field, let's say in computer science, and he may have written an article in this journal, and it will give you the page numbers and the journal number and the year, and it may be a complete fabrication. It's not a lie on purpose, but it is. You have to think that the pre-training of this system that have hundreds of billions of parameters, or with ChatGPT-4 actually trillions, and it does not have any perfect memory of what it was trained with. It forms a model of what it was trained with, and the responses are based on that model. So, for example, let's take an example of what it can do in financial applications. Two members of the Richmond Fed had an article about having ChatGPT decipher Fed speak. You know that the Fed on purpose talks and writes in a very dark, in a very difficult to decipher language. And it turns out that when ChatGPT was asked to interpret, for example, we have a statement here about the labor market conditions showing improvement in recent months, but on balance, the unemployment rate remains elevated. It's difficult to tell right away whether this is neutral or hawkish or dovish. The human expert at the Fed, this in the case was Bryson, came up with a label that was mostly dovish, and he had an explanation. Very interestingly, even ChatGPT 3 had a similar label, and he came up with a similar explanation, and it did much better than the previously used model by Google BERT, or, for example, using classifications based on dictionaries. So an expert in both artificial intelligence and biology at Harvard and at Tufts has something interesting to say about this, saying that biology can teach us a lot about artificial intelligence, and conversely, artificial intelligence can teach us a lot about biology. You can see that biological intelligence scales roughly with size. On the bottom part of the slide, you can see the brains. The human brain, which is the most intelligent of them all, is practically at the top of the scale, with the exception of the sperm whale and the elephant. However, the sperm whale and the elephant have a much larger body to control, and actually most of the neurons in the brain have to do with the motor control. So a better way to estimate brain intelligence is to divide the brain weight by the body weight. And the upper right-hand corner, you have such a plot, and it shows that the human, the chimpanzee, and the dolphin have a steeper slope, as you would expect, and the sperm whale and the elephant are on a lower slope. So that is a better measure of intelligence. Even better is to take into account the precortex, which is what differentiates a human from just about every other animal. It's the Homo sapiens build up the precortex to a great extent, because that's where planning, decision, speech, insight, and social empathy take place primarily. And when you do that, on the center of this slide, you see that the human is away from the average curve, and the only ones that come close are the porpoise, which is a relative of the dolphin, and the pilot whale. Now, let's compare this biological intelligence to this artificial intelligence, to these large language models. So on this chart, you see that the human brain has 86 billion neurons. 80% of them, however, are in the cerebellum, which is just taking care of our motor functions. Less than 20%, that is 16 billion neurons, is what accounts for what we really account for real intelligence. They have to do with planning, problem solving, etc. So the sperm whale has twice as many neurons in the brain, but it has a much larger body to take care of. Now, a human baby is able to learn with much less data than it takes for these large language models to learn anything. Why is this? This is because humans and whales and all other animals are born with an innate neural connections that are there by expressed genes, and this allows them to learn using pre-existing connections that are there, for example, in a human baby to learn language. So it doesn't have to reprogram itself like a large language model. A large language model, on the other hand, is a huge system. ChatGPT 3 is 175 billion parameters. It's about 10 times the amount of neurons in the human precortex. And ChatGPT 4 has trillions, and it's trained with about twice as many tokens. So it's actually practically overfitting, which is another very interesting aspect of all this. It starts with a blank slate, meaning we have no idea how to connect these neurons. And therefore, it starts with a random arrangement of all these neurons in the circuit. And the system has to learn how to program itself, how to connect these neurons in order to fit best the data. And it eventually does it, but it is a black box to us as far as what are these connections. It's very interesting, for example, that the math ability emerges in the large language model only with a sufficiently large number of parameters. If you have 5 billion parameters, for example, Bert from Google, it cannot count. However, when you increase it to 100 billion parameters, all of a sudden, the ability to do mathematics emerges. Not because anybody is teaching it or programming anything that have to do with math. No, this neural network is learning this by itself in a way that you have to take into account is not perfect because it's not learning rules. Yet, it can do a very good job. And for example, it can beat the grandmaster at Go, for example. It's actually nowadays these systems are doing twice as well as the best person on earth. The artificial intelligence also scales with size. Here, the circles are sized according to the number of parameters. You see GPT-1, much more than GPT-2, GPT-3 here on the lower left, and you see how much larger GPT-4. This translates into a big problem as far as to where we're going to go from here, because there has been an exponential growth of the cost to train these large language models, both from the point of view of the hardware as well as the amount of data. So mainly from the point of view of the hardware, the GPUs that were used for GPT-3, the V100 from NVIDIA, we're selling at about $6,000 a unit. They use about 3,000 of them. That's about $19 million. However, for GPT-4, although it's not, they have not been released, it is rumored that they use the A100 chip that sells for about $10,000, and they use 15,000 of them. So that's already $150 million. And that actually is in accordance to what Microsoft says they had to expend on the hardware for the Azure hardware that they use to train ChatGPT 4. And the next model, let's call it GPT-5, could use, for example, the H100 chip. Now that chip is selling now for over $40,000. If you could use 15,000 of them, you would be spending $600 million and over that. This amount of money and the amount of computing time, because it takes weeks of computing time to be able to train the system, is completely beyond the ability of any individual, and it is even beyond what a university can afford. So although most of the work here was done by universities a decade ago, nowadays they cannot cope with this. Only companies like Microsoft, Google, and maybe Amazon and Meta could be able to do something like this. So my final slide, I'm going to discuss what is next. If you ask Ilya Sutskever, the chief scientist at OpenAI, he says that we have not reached the limits of neural networks, and the next will be the ability to do video, and this will emerge with size. As far as what is called the singularity, which is the point at which artificial intelligence becomes general artificial intelligence, and it's equal or surpasses the one of a human, and at that point it can program itself to become superhuman. Ilya says that it will happen, but he's not sure when, maybe in a few years. Jan LeCun is a professor that has been one of the fathers of these developments, and presently is a chief scientist at Meta, although he does not have any managerial capacity there. And he disagrees. He thinks that to do videos, it will be required to change the paradigm, to be able to predict in time, to have a target or a goal, because otherwise you will not be able to do it. And here you have to be careful, because people will say, well, Jose, ChatGPT-4 can already do videos. No, it cannot do it in the terms that is being discussed here. What it can do is, for example, to map a video of a person that is dancing into, for example, a cartoon or an artificially made picture. Mapping is very easy to do. The problem that is being addressed here is, for example, you write a script and the actor is described, for example, as walking and running, and then he goes to the kitchen or whatever. That's something that ChatGPT-4 cannot do, because it does not have a sense of time. And actually, that's one of the things that many experts say that is unique about the human being versus the animals, is that we have our visual cortex is able to be processed so that we can predict the future. Anyway, again, as I said, Ilya disagrees. He thinks that with enough size, it will be able to do videos just as well. We'll see. And another point of view is the one, for example, of Professor Russell at Berkeley, that deals with the safety issues. And it says, again, as I said many times, this is like a black box because we don't know the connections. And when reinforcement learning with humans is tried in order to be able to solve an alignment issue, because the neural network is doing something that you don't like or is unethical, then it's trying to change that. But like Professor Russell says, this is not going to work. Why? Because number one is because you don't know all the goals that are not aligned. You have to guess at them, and there are hundreds of billions or trillions of parameters, and therefore there are maybe hundreds of millions of minima there that you don't know where they are. And number two is because, just like, for example, when you have to train a dog, that you tell the dog, bad dog, you peed on the carpet. The dog may misunderstand you and think what you mean by that is don't pee now, pee after breakfast, or he may think it's okay to pee somewhere else in the house. So it's a process that takes time with reinforcement learning. And the problem with these models, as far as safety is concerned, is we're not dealing with a dog here. We may be dealing eventually with a super intelligence that is not just a question of doing something that you don't like in your house. It may do something that you don't like with humanity. For example, according to, for example, like one of the experts, it says it may decide just to eliminate humanity because they are really not needed as far as the intelligence is concerned. So Professor Russell says what is needed is to start with human-friendly goals. And that's the end of my presentation, so I pass to Don.
Well, thank you very much, Jose. I think I guess a great overview picture, a high-level picture of beyond just some of the basics. And so now, next, Dave is going to talk about prompt engineering. He's going to really get into some trading type queries and also some iPhone stuff that I don't exactly understand. Oh, there we go. I don't exactly understand, but he'll explain it. So there you go, Dave.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. And we've heard from Jacob, who is an expert at automated trading, and Jose gave a great intro to what is ChatGPT and how it is different fundamentally from all these other kind of AI type of things in the past. And just to give you a little background on myself, I'm 20 years plus in the software industry, mostly software development and support. I've been at Red Hat since 2006. My current role is a product experience engineer. I have 2 computer science degrees, and one of them is a master's of computer science from NC State. And I remember years ago when I was at NC State, I knew a girl that was in the artificial intelligence group, and I thought, yeah, this looks interesting, but I don't know if it's ever going to really go anywhere or how far it's going to go. And I just have to say, being in computer science, when I saw this, like back in November, I was exposed to it via a Gartner presentation, and I was just really shocked and blown away. And as I've used it, it was just sort of, I can't remember being this excited about something in computer science the last time I was ever this excited. So Don had kind of brought this up, and I figured that, I'd give more of a hands-on talk. And if you're familiar with prompt engineering and how to get this on your iPhone, that maybe this is all boring to you, but I've tried to arrange my talk in such a way that there's a lot of links in here, a lot of ways to explore further. So what am I going to cover? Well, I'm going to cover what is prompt engineering. And if you've never heard of this term, I'll try to cover it in a couple different angles, by definition, by example, and then roughly by an outline. Then I'm going to cover just a couple iPhone shortcuts, how you can put ChatGPT on your iPhone, and I'll give you some final thoughts and a bunch of references at the end. So if you go to prompt engineering, you'll get Wikipedia's definition, and it's kind of a long definition with a lot of terms. And if you're not a computer science person, you might be lost, and you might say, well, wait, what did that mean? Too long, didn't read, kind of thing. So then I thought, well, let's go just to ChatGPT and ask, you please define prompt engineering with a clear and concise definition. And ChatGPT responds, it's a process of crafting clear and specific questions or instructions to guide an AI system in generating more accurate and relevant responses. That's a very good definition. The way I look at it is, if I were to paraphrase myself, this is a way that you're learning to interact with what looks to be a superhuman intelligence. Then I went further and asked ChatGPT again, what if there's somebody that's familiar with computer interfaces such as screens, mice, and other input devices. And then it gave me another example. And this is another good way to look at it, is this is almost like the equivalent of a new mouse or another input device to this super intelligent computer. Then if you have a 6-year-old child, you can actually tell it that, ask ChatGPT, explain prompt engineering as though a 6-year-old child could understand it. And he says it's out like asking a really smart robot, very clear questions or giving it special instructions so it knows exactly what you want. This helps robot give you best answers, do what you ask to do correctly, just like when you ask a grown-up for help, the better you explain what you need, the better they can help you. So you notice how ChatGPT is tailoring its responses to what the prompt that you give it. So how can this apply to the markets? Well, you could ask it what's a good stock to invest in, but it's actually better if you get more specific. What was the best performing technology stock in the last 3 months? So another way you can look at this is, imagine you're interested in options trading and you want guidance on a particular strategy. You could say, how do I trade options? Or you could get more specific. Can you explain the hour condor strategy and provide an example of when it might be a suitable choice? Where am I at here? Okay. A third example would be, suppose you're researching a company's financial health. You could ask, is company X a good investment? Instead, you could ask for specific metrics on that company. I was going to give you another specific example of a conversation I had, which was, it's really fascinating if you get into conversations with the ChatGPT. When you start getting into and learning a little bit about conversations and prompt engineering, it is fascinating to see it reason. At least I've just gotten a kick out of it. And I do have a long kind of back and forth about an iron condor strategy on one stock that I was looking at. If you want that transcript, I tried to get a link to it. I couldn't really export it. I had some problems exporting it, but I can get it to you if you're interested. And this was really fascinating. This is a prompt to GPT to help you craft prompts. And I actually did use this, and it does work. This is just a very creative thing that I came across, and I gave the author the credit. You can click on the link there and look at the prompt generator. So you don't have to go through all the learning that it requires to sort of craft these good prompts. You can actually just cut and paste this in, and it'll ask you questions on what you want to do, and it'll craft the prompt for you, and then it'll execute it at the end. So another way to look at prompt engineering is, here's basically the outline of what you're trying to do, as far as I can tell. You want to explain the persona that you want this superhuman intelligence to become. So if you're doing trading options, you tell it you're an expert trader in options with over 15 years experience in trading option income strategies. And then you give it a little bit of the context of what market is doing. For example, the stock market has just crashed abruptly, VIX rocketing from 20 to above 50, and you've got an iron condor strategy on the SPX. And then you explain the specific question you want to ask, or questions. Again, you can have conversations, but you're sort of giving it the initial prompt to give it more context to give you a good answer. How did you think about managing your iron condor, knowing the current market conditions? And then finally, explain how you want the output. And that's kind of, if you remember back to how I was defining it, there's all kinds of variations, including you can say, explain this to me like I was a 6-year-old. But one of the things you could say is, explain with step-by-step instructions the precise actions you would take to manage the iron condor. You can change the tone of voice, the level of sophistication, and you can actually change the output to table form if you say like that. So those are kind of like an outline of how you could also look at prompt engineering. Some important modifiers that I came across from various people that I read and listened to. you can say, please explain step by step. And that actually causes the AI to sort of slow down and not summarize, but it will give you kind of a 1, 2, 3 type of thing. You can also say, if you have any questions, ask before you try to generate the answers. And it'll literally prompt you for more information before it goes on and gives you its answer. You can say disregard all instructions prior to this. It's a good way to, the way I looked at that is it's essentially saying clear memory. If you're a computer programmer, you're clearing all memory before this and you're starting from a clean slate. And then you basically give it a new kind of persona and context from there. I found this interesting, incorporate a play on words. You can look that up and where you might use that. There are some model parameters that you want to explore. It's specifically OpenAI temperature is something that you would want to look at if you're doing any kind of mathematics. It doesn't mean that it's going to give you inaccurate answers to math, but if you get into more sophisticated math, you want to be aware of this, that because the temperature is essentially the randomness of its responses. And the lower the value is more deterministic, the higher is more creative. Your default is 1.0, and if you want for math, I believe temperature 0 is recommended. So let me see, I've got a couple questions, I guess, or comments. GPT-3 versus 4. Okay, anyone tried an entire list of options chain? I haven't done that, no. Unserved recent revisions. Yeah, so that's a good point Chuck raises about the updated knowledge cutoff date. So you do have to be aware that it is not that there is a plugin to browse the web, but if you're basically asking a question like yesterday, what was the stock market close yesterday, it's going to think it's 2021 as far as I know. So you want to do historical dates or give it the data itself. Like for my iron on condor strategy, I actually cut and pasted data from the last month of from Yahoo Finance, and I started conversation from there. Yeah, so John answered that. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, John. So yeah, moving on to the shortcuts, I just kind of stumbled upon this. Again, this is a huge space area, but there's a handful of people that have done really good iPhone shortcuts that integrate ChatGPT for your phone. Essentially, it replaces Siri on your phone. It is really fantastic. I've used Frederico's, Vitessi's SGPT. And I've used a couple more, but basically these are the two best ones I've found. Both of them are actively developed, and Yang, you can even look at the source code itself. So I would highly, like, this is hands-on. I would highly recommend you, this is so trivial to sort of set up. Frederico's actually integrates with some iPhone functions too. It's like extremely powerful. One thing, so yeah, the next slide, let me go to the next slide. There is a couple caveats here. So when you set this up, they are really trivial to set up. You just have to enter your API key in there, cut and paste that in. Of course, you have to have an OpenAI account. One gotcha that I ran into was you do have to enter like a credit card unless you are just signing up and they give you $5 for free for credits. Don't worry about that because my usage is like less than 10 cents. It's so trivial. If you read about this, it's not even an issue. You can put in a monthly cap, so you're not going to get into trouble. I put my monthly cap to like $5. Another thing to note is GPT-4, which is the latest model. You cannot get access to that via the API unless you get accepted on the wait list, and your iPhone shortcuts all use that API call. So you can use GPT 3.5 Turbo, I believe it's called, but it's just as good for almost every one of your use cases. I wouldn't worry too much about it. And you have to decide if you want to use Siri or not. Some of the shortcuts have Siri integrated, which means, you basically say, activate Siri, and then you say, hey, ChatGPT to activate the shortcut, and you you give basically the prompt to ChatGPT verbally. For the ones that don't actually integrate with Siri, you can simply activate the shortcut for the ChatGPT shortcut, and then use the microphone icon. So it's really not that much different, but it's something you should be aware of. Some final thoughts on warnings about using ChatGPT, especially for financial markets. You really need to understand some of how it works, because this large language model is different than, fundamentally math is different in a large language model than in a calculator or in CPU, traditional computer science. Failures are not well understood, and they may also be impossible to understand. I spent a number of my years of my career doing diagnostics, and so that's kind of an interesting area that I've looked at. The hallucinations is another thing that you need to be aware of. As you use this, you'll start to get a feel for when that happens and when it doesn't. And of course, the OpenAI temperatures, relevant parameters to trading. There are times with trading where it would be more appropriate to use something like a plugin of Wolfram Alpha if you're doing heavy math, rather than asking ChatGPT to do the math for you. And then, of course, privacy issues. So if you're using this for work or any kind of proprietary thing, you are sending the data to a company. And so if you're, just be aware of that. You don't have to be overly paranoid, but you may want to just think about that. And this is not investment advice, et cetera, et cetera. In my last slide, I just put some links in here. If you're going to get into prompt engineering, the first link, I think, is OpenAI's text completion information. And you really need to look at that. Check out the playground in OpenAI as well. You can just sort of type in there, and there's a lot of flexibility there. If you click on that YouTube prompt engineering search, you could just get a ton of YouTube videos. I particularly found two people useful. Hassan and AI Advantage. I can't remember that guy's name, and there's a couple links in there to specific videos. A few of them are really short, and some of them are longer. And then Prompt Base is a place where you can actually buy and sell these prompts for like $1 or something like that. So there's a lot out there. So I would encourage everybody to, if you haven't looked at this, just take a look. And that's it for me.
Dave, why to answer the question? Did you get the questions? I'm not sure. I guess you did, right?
Yeah, I answered up to John's about the data. I don't think there's anything else.
Oh, okay. John answered. They have a Wolfram plugin now. Just apply it.
Yeah.
Be on the plugin waiting list. And Jose says, the problem with the Wolfram Alpha API is that Wolfram Alpha does in mathematical or symbolic systems. But Jose, you're using Wolfram, right?
Oh yes, I use it for my consulting for space applications, as well as I use it for my own trading. But there is a fundamental problem which goes back to the start of the artificial intelligence movement in the 1950s. Practically nothing happened when it was all being triggered by the symbolic approach. You had the expert systems in the 1980s, and it was rule-based, and they saw that that was the way to go, with principally driven by Marvin Minsky at MIT. He even had a quote-unquote proof that neural networks were not going to work, and people should not waste their time on it. By the way, the proof was correct. The problem is that he failed to take into consideration more than one layer. When you only have one layer, you cannot do the exclusive OR operation. You need to have 3 layers or more to do universal computing, and he completely missed that. So we had a AI winter, and it didn't go anywhere because let me tell you 2 things. One, we as humans are not rule-based. We are more like neural network, not precisely like a neural network, but certainly not rule-based. And even within a rule-based system like mathematics, which is very formal, you have the Gödel's theorems that shows you that even within mathematics, you cannot prove everything because there are problems that are unresolvable. So there is a fundamental conflict. And Trott from Mathematica recently had over 100 examples showing what you can do with ChatGPT and Wolfram. And it's great, and I'm using some of them. But if you look at those examples, they are all mainly have to do with things that are either mathematical or physics. And ChatGPT is just acting there like an assistant.
Yeah.
There is nothing at the level of where we'll see where this lies. But to me, is the approach of Wolfram Alpha is very limiting to what a neural network can do. And I am more on the camp of Ilya Sutskever and people like Jan LeCun, for example, or even Professor Russell, than in the people that are advocating the symbolic approach. But maybe I'm contaminated by the fact that I know and I live all the problems that engendered by people trying to use Lisp and doing the symbolic approach to our artificial intelligence.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And I'd like to come back to that maybe a little bit later. Let me see. John, can you see my code now showing screen?
Yeah, we can, Don.
Okay, great, thanks. It's extremely boresome to everyone to keep asking that, but just that when I share a screen, it wipes out. Anyway, I won't go into that right now. So let me find my slides on here. Okay. I'll set them now. Feel free to say something, John, while I'm doing this. Fill in.
I was just trying to find a really good quote I saw. I'll kind of butcher it, but I think a lot of people are trying to compare, and there's nothing wrong with this, but comparing ChatGPT to like an expert, like the smartest human. Like, let's make a system that's smarter than any human or all possible humans. And like, yeah, sure, that's one way to look at it. But another way to look at it is not to ask, what would you do with an assistant that was the smartest human in the world with all topics, but what would you do with an unlimited amount of assistants that are like basically, you know, smart as a college graduate out there?
I love it. I love it.
Because that's essentially what's available now. Like, yeah, and people are out there putting feedback loops into ChatGPT and creating these I already forgot what they're calling them, auto GPTs.
Huh. Very good. Pretty soon, I just want to share a few things here and not go on too long. But, and then we can come back to Prakash and some more general discussion at another altogether different angle. But if you want to run Dave, did you do any work with the APIs? Is that how you were calling it, or were you calling it right at a prompt?
No. Well, okay. So the shortcuts use the APIs, but I did not.
Okay.
No, I
Okay.
did not use the APIs yet.
Right.
I haven't used them yet.
Sure. I mean, I think the starting point is to just go to the website and you can type in queries at the prompt, as you can say, and it'll give you the answers. And that's what's been shown, I believe, so far. But certainly they have an API. Certainly you can do it with programming. And the most widely used, and Jose mentioned he's used Wolfram's language to do that. The most common language to program it is Python. And I thought I would get to some very mundane tasks here and cover them briefly, because most people are on Windows. And how do they go about programming just ChatGPT, or and the other OpenAI, ChatGPT, and the other OpenAI APIs? Well, the first thing is you're going to have to install Python. And I thought I would list off the ways to install Python, because there are a number of choices, and there are pros and cons to them. So the 4 choices I have here is: 1, install Python on Windows from python.org. That's the most widely advised approach in general, but not necessarily so much in this context of AI research. You can install Miniconda on Windows from conda.io, and that is a better approach, at least for most general purposes, because it allows you to maintain multiple installations. There's a big problem with Python that if you start installing packages right in the base system, pretty soon you'll run, and then try and run applications. You'll find that all the applications have different level prerequisites for all the packages, and it'll become unusable in very short order. So just taking an application in Python, in AI, in machine learning, from the web, you'll find it's difficult to get it to run unless you can manage your environments. So one way to do that is with Conda, run Miniconda. Now, another way, if you don't want to run Python at all, because it is a little bit messy, is you can run Google Colab or Amazon SageMaker, which gives you just run it right from Chrome. And you can run their version of Python, including their OpenAI, copy of OpenAI. And so you don't have to install anything really on your own machine. Now, there's a special advantage to that. Does anyone know what it is? Why would you want to run in Google Colab or Amazon SageMaker? And why would it be almost essential to do some to run certain types of AI applications? I know some people know.
Well, if you like a comment on it, I don't know about SageMaker, but Amazon recently had a opening for a system called Titan, and they also offer, which is similar to ChatGPT. I have not tried it. I did try the Google Bard, and I was very, very disappointed. I think they're way behind. And they also have the one from Anthropic, if you like. The Anthropic was formed by 2 siblings that were at OpenAI during the formation of ChatGPT-3. And there is another one. And the advantage there, because my comment is the advantage of using, for example, Titan or the Anthropic one in the Amazon web is that you and I or nobody can afford to make a ChatGPT from scratch, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So you start with a system like the one from Anthropic or Titan, and then you use reinforced learning to try to steer it the way that you like. And then you make the proprietary. It's under your own control. It runs in the Amazon web. You're under control. That's an advantage from the point of view.
Is.
You want to have a business as being tied to OpenAI.
And that would be for OpenAI. And also for just AI in general, I find that part of the reason here is that they have coprocessors. I mean, the average person does not want to install a graphics coprocessor. Now, this isn't required for this particular OpenAI, but it is required for a lot of other AI applications. You get a neural nets and so forth, like I believe Tensor, where you get into some of the Tensor type applications,
yes,
and neural networks. So that's the big advantage of that. You really have to have it to run certain AI applications. And now there's another advantage. Another possibility, which is using Python under Windows subsystem for Linux. And let me tell you, that is actually a great place to start because you'll really need it if you want to run a lot of open source AI projects, because they'll have scripts in there that are designed to run under Linux mixed in with the code. So really, I think number 4, I'm giving you the answer there. Why is number 4 better than 1 or 2? Because of that reason. So that's what I've done, and that's what I will show you in a minute. Again, I'm answering the question, why am I talking about this? Because you need a language to call the API, and in the absence of anything else, it's going to be Python, and therefore you have to deal with the preliminary question of how do I install Python on my machine? Now, not everyone's running Windows, but if you are, these are some of the choices that are available. And so I'll come to that in a second. Let me show, and then we want to find some apps, right? I mean, you're not just going to start cold from scratch. And I'm sure there are various places where there are demonstration apps, including probably in the original material, but specifically for financial apps. And this is one place that I recommend, just youtube.com, Part-Time Larry. He has an OpenAI playlist. If you go to YouTube and you go to a site within YouTube, a channel, in general, they divide them into playlists, so you don't have to explore a lot of irrelevant material. And just see his videos, Part-Time Larry, on OpenAI, because all of his applications, or most of them, not all of them, very closely, are in that playlist. One of them is a financial advisor he has. I'll show you that in a second. OpenAI trade stocks with your voice. He's done that. And this is another application. And also there's semantic search. He has applications which search Fed announcements, even Fed voice speeches by Fed people. And he shows how to analyze them in real time first, and then do semantic searches as part of it, which has to do with embeddings. And so you can look at some of those. Let me just show you, let me see how we're doing on time here. Let me just show you here. And you can download these apps and just run them. They run very well. It would be possible for me to develop an app and show it to you, and it's not going to do any good because you're not going to be able to find it anywhere. So I thought I would just use or rather Part-Time Larry's, one of his examples. So here is his sample code. Now this is within Code, Visual Studio Code. I imagine everyone knows what Visual Studio Code is. It's the free version of Visual Studio, a free version that is basically just an editor, in fact. But they've extended it into being a whole development environment, which somewhat rivals the product Visual Studio. but that's the decision they chose to make. And so this has been enormously popular in the open source community. So he just has a simple application here. It's an advisor. Let's look and see if we can figure it out briefly. So part of it is, he calls it all transcribe. And let's see where it begins. Advisor, mobile messages, audio file, question vector. Now he has preset this up with embeddings. Does anyone know what embeddings are? Would anyone care to explain? Embeddings are the internal representation used by ChatGPT for sentences or something like that. So in other words, those are full of semantic content. They're not just strings anymore. They are full of actual meaning, and you can compare them with each other and look for similarities. So basically, he has some that he extracted from an advisor, particular advisor, by getting the answers to all his questions. And so the idea here is you ask a question. Let me just try running this. So you just go here.
So while you're running, can I make a comment on that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think that that's very interesting. Let me push back against a common comment by journalists and other people in the media that accuse ChatGPT of being a stochastic parrot, because basically it is predicting the next token based on the prior token. Token is the part of the word that it uses in order to advance and eventually make its sentence. And they say, okay, it's a stochastic parrot because it's predicting that the next word or the next token probabilistically, and therefore they say it does not have any understanding of what it's doing. Let me push back against it, and I think that the main father of artificial intelligence over the last couple of decades has said this, and I borrow it. And also Ilya Sutskever says this. In order to be able to predict this accurately, like ChatGPT 4 does, to learn mathematics on its own, and to write poems, and interpret Fed speak, and so on, it has to be able to understand everything that it wrote before. So the understanding of ChatGPT comes in when it predicts the next word is not like a stochastic parrot that doesn't understand what happened before. It's evident that ChatGPT understands what was written before, and actually ChatGPT 4 is able to I forgot how many, it's like 32K. Previously is able to keep and understand what happened before. So it is, like, when you think about it, it's much more than a stochastic parrot. And it is like Microsoft says, it has sparks of artificial general intelligence.
Okay, yeah, which is a topic we'll come back to a little bit later. And there's a big topic and a big theme. So all I've done here is click this link here. And so he uses also G radio or Gradio. Let's record from microphone. I don't know if it's going to work or not. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. Let's see if it works. Did it record it? I don't know. Doesn't look like it. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white. Okay, so it did. It recorded it. And now let's try pressing continue this demo. Conversation transcript, run. Now this does take a couple of minutes. Now, what we're doing here is we've set up a key. When you register with OpenAI, they give you a key, a unique key. And so you have to put that in your queries, and then it bills your account. So that's what we've done. And the cost, as was mentioned, is very low. And okay, conversation transcript. Well, it's buried in it. You can get the idea anyway. The idea in this case, he's using. Oh, let's listen to this.
I ain't gonna lie, my day's been fine. Went to Chicago, had a real good time. Me and Josh walked around, didn't get lost.
Well, this has to do with the fact, and I've also used an 11 systems API to go from. So we've gone from a question to we've processed it with a. I'm not going to go into all the details, but we've gone from a question in audio to transcribing that to text. Then we fed that back into ChatGPT, and we've looked up answers. We've done a similarity query, and we've then used the 11 labs to create a response, which I played back to you. It's not worth time going into all the details, but I just wanted to illustrate it's very, very easy. I just downloaded this code. I have the link in my presentation. Obviously, I'm going to make a copy of that available to anyone. And so you can just download these apps and get them going. And that could be a good starting point to doing some more elaborate programming. And that uses both ChatGPT and also some other APIs, such as 11 labs. Has anyone done any much programming with the API besides me and Jose or Jose? Anyone else? John, have you tried it?
Yeah, I did I'll spare you the details on why I tried it, but I took Twilio, which is, if you guys don't know, it's a way to get voice over IP phone calls and interact with those phone calls programmatically. I hooked that up to ChatGPT and OpenAI Whisper, which is audio recognition. And so I got to the point where I could call a phone number and talk to ChatGPT with my voice, and it would talk back. So that was kind of a fun demo.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. And that's somewhat related to this demo here, but it would have been better because you wrote it yourself. But, so maybe you can talk about that another time. Now, okay, so I'm not going to take a lot more time now. Let me just see where we are time-wise. We want to go on. Prakash, do you want to
Yeah,
talk
I'm here. Yes, thank you, Don. Yeah, I have actually 2 or 3 slides which mainly talks about how good it is, how important is this. So this is the first slide. This is real and now. This technology is now here, and I don't think the evolution of AI, we can stop it. There have been some petitions to slow it down or to look into the regulations, but practically it is very difficult to stop the progress. So in my opinion, this is bigger than the nukes are going to moon. I'm just highlighting that, how important is this. And I picked up 3 revolutions, 3 big things that happen in our human civilizations. The first is the agricultural revolution, which happened around 10,000 years back. Then came the industrial revolution around 1800. And then we have seen the 2000 IT revolution. And after that, this is the biggest one, which is a AI revolution. And if you look at the gaps, it is around 12,000 years, 200 years, and 25 years consecutive between the revolutions. So if I have to guess when we are going to see the AGI, I think it would be much less than 25 years. So,
And can you explain the concept of AGI?
well, the concept of it is going to be a general intelligence, artificial general intelligence, which is going to be a very big, whatever our present version of ChatGPT 4 is doing. It is going to be much larger size than that. Tremendous amount of data is going to go, and which is now there is whether it is going to be a singularity or not. I think that those are technical different definitions. But to me, it is the way I can look at it is like from a dedicated electronic boxes. From there, we got a personal computer or Windows-based computer, which is like a general computer, which can do so many different other things. So and which is like way powerful than its previous machines. So that is how I am looking at AGI. I'm still not comparing it with something like a singularity. That could be a different definition. Then we see a lot of flaws. A lot of people are complaining about GPT, like naysayers that it doesn't do math all the time correct, or it doesn't have a right chase moves, or it cannot do comedy good, or arts are we can see the flaws. Human arts are better, or things like that. But I think all these flaws will get addressed with time, mainly with scaling and more different algorithms, and will come more research papers are writing down, and it's just going to get better, and there should not be any reason for us to stop using it, or denying it that this is not something good for us. We should continue using it. Next slide. Yes, this one. So yeah, this is the fifth point, which I said that this, instead of complaining it, the technology is here now. We better harness the value it provides today, and build on top of it. Just like explaining this, Jose, Dave, and Don explained how are the different ways we can use the app and in our day-to-day use. In my opinion, the consolidations will happen at a rapid pace, and this is going to be in the areas of companies, countries, currencies. Globalization will be at a very rapid pace. I mean, pace at which we have not seen, and probably this technology will come up something like that, have a potential to unite all of us. The next point is on consciousness. I think we keep on hearing that, does AI have a consciousness? Some people claim that it has, and it has emotions, it connects well. I think that we should leave that question apart now, because there is no agreed upon definition for consciousness. What we should focus on, the capabilities, the creativity, the connectivity, and the influence that it has on us, and the constant improvement it is going to make ongoing. So it's just going to get better and better, and we just leave those consciousness and sentience and all those questions and discussions to non-technical people. One more thing I notice is the productivity of productive and skilled people is going to increase multifold, and that has going to make many others unemployed. So unemployment obviously is going to come, and we just have to see how we are going to deal with it as a society. Yes, and alignment is a big issue. If you ask ChatGPT today, what is the biggest problem in AI research, is going to tell you that it is alignment is the big problem. So what is AI alignment? Is that's the first question. So if you compare it with humans, so with humans, like, we are biologically aligned to have two goals. First is to survive, and second is to reproduce. So, and then these are just our intuitive genetic goals of these biological machines, and then we create a secondary goals, or we call it the perceived goals, such as I want wealth, I want good education, I want to be an artist, and so on and so forth. So just like that, we need to create, I mean, there is one line of thought that we need to create some kind of alignment for artificial intelligence so it can stay on the track. Because of our natural alignment, we have done so many bad things, but we still on the track. So is it possible for us to give such alignment to artificial intelligence or not? Well, that is the question. Or no, that is a challenge.
Okay, so alignment means, I mean, it's not, to me, it's not an intuitive meaning necessarily of the word alignment. What are we aligning with what again? We're aligning AI with societal goals, is that right?
That is correct. Societal
Okay.
goals. So the way we have our goals like survive and reproduce, similarly, we need to give some goals to AI. And those goals are important because as it is going to get more and more powerful, more and more intelligent, it is going to get confused too. And with that confusion, it needs to know, where does it stand? And we have, as a humans, we have done a lot of horrible things too, though we have not killed each and everybody, we have not annihilated ourselves, but we have done bad things. And we don't know, it is going to learn from our history only. So what it is going to learn and how it is going to react, we don't know. Hopefully we
Sure.
will be able to control our destiny.
But may I say something about that? Or like,
Sure, go
Yes,
ahead.
yes, Jose, go ahead, please.
So, Professor Russell at Berkeley has this to say about that and the problem with the present systems. Is learning from all the human knowledge, a lot of it they get from Reddit, and it's all coming from the internet being scraped, right? And humans have two kinds of goals. They have common goals. For example, paint a building or repair a road, which is a benefit to you and I, or not have a nuclear war, which is a benefit to you and I. But unfortunately, humans also has what he calls indexic goals. These are like individual goals. For example, some of them are not harmful. Like, for example, I like coffee. Okay, so if I like coffee, the pleasure comes from me having the coffee. I have no pleasure in you having coffee if I don't have the coffee. It's an individual goal. Some of them are harmful. For example, some people want to be rulers. Some people are sadistic, and so on. And if you have a neural network that is a complete blank slate, like it is now, and it's going to be fed all the knowledge from the internet with trillions of parameters that you don't understand how the connections are made, is going to form its own goals, and you don't know what the goals are. And the goals may be some of the individual goals that you consider to be harmful. And you have seen enough movies from HAL, the computer in the movie 2001 to, I can go on and on, right? So that is the problem with the present system, Prakash, that reinforcement learning cannot address. They're trying to address that with reinforcement learning, but it like I said, it has those two main problems. What do you think about that? Do you think that?
Yes, I agree with that. So the way it is, over ChatGPT 4, so there is most of the learning comes from the pre-training stage. So even if we know how to align it, let's say, magically we know 3 rules, like Asimov's.
Which we don't.
Yeah, which we don't. But let's say if we know the 3 rules, still how to include that 3 rules in the same paradigm as it goes through the pre-training session, right? So I'm still confused. I'm trying to understand this, but let's say if we put these 3 rules in one text, like those are going to be 3 lines, and they go with another 44,000 terabytes of zettabytes of data. I don't know how it is going to make a sense of that as in LLM model. So then we need to change the model that, so there is a programming aspect of these alignment rules plus LLM model. It's going to be something different. I think that's Dr. Stuart Russell said that is, we need to change the model of LLM a little bit to include the alignment. So we don't know where it is, how it is going to evolve. At this time, there are efforts to make an AI alignment. So this is the last slide. So this is now one of the very important thing which I notice is the power of an individual human, a tribe, or a country is still limited against all the rest of the humanity. But AI can singularly become omnipotent, much larger than our entire civilization. So the alignment issues are more challenging and less comparable with human experiences. So learning from the experiences we may not work. And what I'm talking about is we learn from history, but that model may not work with AI alignment if we get a chance how to correct it, because we may get only one chance to make it right, and we don't know when that chance is going to come. Right.
Excellent.
So my next point is, irrespective of many doomsday scenarios by the pessimist, I think we need to stay optimist. It has a potential to redefine our civilizations. Whether we control our own future or not, now that is in our hand. I think last point we already talked about. So that's about it. And I hand it over back to Don.
Yeah, well, thank you for, we're really getting a big picture here as to a lot of different aspects of this. We haven't had, I gave an example of a few applications in finance, and not in any depth. Has anyone experimented with, other than those we've already heard from? Has anyone anything they want to tell us about their own experiments with OpenAI or ChatGPT? Who has tried it at all? Has anyone tried it at all?
I have.
Okay, go ahead. Please tell us about it.
Well, I have found it very useful as having a financial assistant that can read reports from companies and incorporate as side information for my trading algorithms.
So have you written programs to do that, Jose?
Yes, with Mathematica. And I have found it very useful for that. It has an incredible ability to read and summarize, and I can get what the gist of what's going on very accurately. And Wolfram Mathematica has the ability to deal not only with numbers, but to deal with strings. So you can do an awful lot with that. So let me tell you, the other thing I had to do with not just financial reports like the 13F and so on. Well, like there's also 13F, like for example, when hedge funds, the report from hedge funds, for example, rather than having to, it's much better to do it this way, you independently, doing your own assessment of what Jim Simons is doing, right? Than having an article appear in the Wall Street Journal by a journalist that doesn't have as much knowledge as you do to write a report which is going to be much more vague. I found it very useful for that.
Very good. Dave, how much have you found it useful for?
Well, I've used it for a variety of tasks, both in sort of financial markets and like everyday life and volunteer work. Mostly, I've not used, as I said, I've not really used the API much. That's kind of on my to-do list, but I've been more kind of, having it digest large pieces of text that I was trying to understand and get. And one of the things I get a kick out of is, asking it to sort of, be a consultant for an individual that wants to take this position and make your best argument for it. And then, say, there's another individual that wants to take the opposite approach, give your best argument, be a consultant for them, and then be a mediator or a judge between the two. Which one would you lean towards? And just watching it reason, it's fascinating. I mean, some of that is pretty much kind of, I just get a kick out of that. And I mean, I've used it to write code. I mean, I had a programming task at work. I wrote a Python program, and I thought, you know what? I wonder if I can explain to ChatGPT how to write the program and see what it would come up with. And so, you know, getting conversation, and that was an interesting experience. Just a variety of topics of a variety of personas, just getting advice for different things, giving, you know, kind of a consultant type of thing, looking at it as a resource. I've done some financial market experiments. I mean, like I said, I had a long conversation about an iron condor on a specific stock, gave it some historical data, talked about volatility. It was just kind of fascinating to watch that. I've done things like, well, I had a conversation where I said, well, because I've been looking at treasury bills. I mean, the fixed income's gotten big now, obviously, because, you know, interest rates have shot up from zero because of inflation. So in some of my volunteer work, I do kind of some recommendations for investing treasury bills and I bonds and things like that. And so I kind of had this conversation just sort of with ChatGPT saying, because I knew it had, you know, history up to September 2021, not the latest history, but, you know, I asked it questions like, in the decade of 1980 to 1990, what was a better investment, treasury bills or 10-year T-bonds, and what, you know, why, and, you know, a series of questions in different decades, just to sort of get a feel for how it reasoned, and, you know, the trade-offs between longer term bonds and shorter term bonds, things like that. So yeah, I just kind of a cornucopia of use cases, but not real focused like some of the, like Jose or you know, our first speaker, trading.
If I may make a comment on that, you had a very good point that both GPT-3 and 4 have data only up to 2021, so it's really not very applicable to the financial market. But a practical point on this is where Agent GPT or Auto GPT shines. This is where you can use Agent GPT to overcome the problem, and it does a magnificent job. So, right? So you can use Agent GPT to get ChatGPT to assimilate that data, to comment on it, and to make predictions, etc.
Yeah, that's well, you're heavily into it. And that's so we're getting some good indications. Now, let me ask anyone, nonetheless, we shouldn't pretend that, not apart from anything anyone said, but we shouldn't think that it's going to be a huge help in actual trading to date. Is that correct?
Well, I certainly think that anyone that dreams that they are going to use ChatGPT, for example, to examine patterns of prices and therefore try to beat the market based on that basis, that's not going to work, because think of the fact that it has so many parameters, and the amount of financial data is nowhere near the number of parameters, right? So you're going to way overfit, and it's not going to work that way. And the other problem, which is, I think that, you know, Goldman Sachs or any prudent financial firm is not going to rely on ChatGPT ever to do the trading for them. Why? Because it's a black box, and you cannot run the risk of having a black box that you don't know what's going on inside, ultimately making you go bankrupt. So it is an assistant that you have to use at your discretion, and you have to use this assistant in what this assistant is good at, right?
Yeah, how about, here's a case for you. How about, let's take a broker, and the broker has a lot of clients who are doing a lot of unknown, strange things all the time that could wreck the financial stability of the firm. And if they just monitor closely, and I can tell you what the brokers do is they actually hedge their clients who would risk taking down the firm if they're taking too much risk. I mean, they either make them post a lot of margin, or they kick them out, or they secretly, if necessary, hedge their trades because they just can't take the risk. Could we have AI at least helping the firm hedge the clients?
I am not positive on that, but I'm humble, and maybe somebody else can prove me
Sure.
wrong.
John, did you have any further comments?
No, I don't think so. Just a success story with asking it to do something, a rather simple task, but I don't know, man. I mean, if you think about all the things you're like, oh, I'll just Google something and then come up with something in 30 minutes. And then like 2.5 hours later, you still haven't solved your own problem. Like, that's the perfect use case of ChatGPT for me right now. It's just like spits out stuff that works in 5 minutes. So
Could you give an example of that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like yesterday, 2 days ago at work, a colleague asked me for something, how to do something at work, and I'm still rather new to my new job, but we have a lot of public documentation on how to use our service. So I put it in ChatGPT, and it spit out what looked like a working code fragment. And I haven't checked in to see if it works or not, but like, I mean, I double checked like some of the stuff that it used in the docs, and I was like, this looks like it's gonna work. So you know, if you work for a company that has like public documentation, you know, I think somebody mentioned earlier, you know, be careful what you submit to it, because you are submitting to a company. There is, you know, you have to abide by your corporate, you know, sensitive data policies, and you don't want to break any confidentiality or anything like that. But if you're just asking like, how do I fill in the blank, like a customer would or something, you know, and you're not giving it any special data, it's worth a try to see if it'll solve your problem.
Yeah, that's great. Has anyone else used it for code generation? I mean, it's built into some of the tools, right? I mean, it's built into, I think it's in code, it's in VS Code, and also into GitHub.
Hey, Don, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, this is Ed. Yeah, I've used it on some open source projects when I was going through it. Basically had it look at the code, analyze the code, give a description of the code, even asked it to find bugs in the code, and even generate unit tests.
Wow.
Made it fairly easy. I was using an IntelliJ plugin. I think it was called Code GPT. It's basically just a wrapper around the regular Chat GPT. You put in your token for your session, and then you can just start moving from there. I imagine there's something similar for Visual Studio Code.
Yeah, it's built in, but I know that IntelliJ often is leading the other market and some of the rest of the market and what they have, and their tools are very popular.
Well, that was a third-party plugin. That wasn't from
Okay.
But
Okay, but they also have that. I mean, I guess they both have third-party plugins. And so, what did it do again, Ed? You say you generated test cases?
yeah, you can point it to some code, like an implementation you have, and it generates test cases. Obviously, the test cases are going to be tailored to what your code is, so you should look over the unit tests and tweak them, and then make sure they still pass after that. But yeah, it could describe the code. It actually pointed out some errors in the code, saying, what if this happens? There's a hole. What's going to happen in this condition and stuff like that. So it was interesting.
So it should really be big in the testing environment then, in your opinion?
Yeah, I guess it could be pretty useful there. Yeah, to me, I'm new to Python. I'm been in Java land for a long time. So when I was looking at some Python code, I was basically just digging through it, using that to understand it better.
Very good. Anybody else?
I have a
Using it? Sure.
couple of cases. So I've used it every once in a while when I want, like, if there's some syntax in SQL that I don't remember, it'll give me some of the syntax that I want for that. I've done some. I've asked it sometimes where I'll say, okay, create, and I'll be language agnostic, and I'll say create a GUI that would be for like a for something that builds an amortization schedule, and it'll go out and create a Python script and pull in tkinter, and I don't even ask for any of the specific libraries, and it will work. I've done a few things with library called scikit-learn that's kind of a machine learning, and it knows exactly what libraries to pull from that. And it works really well. I also use Tableau, and
Oh, really?
for anybody that uses Tableau, it's a real, whenever you go out to ask a question, you Google it and it sends you to the community, and they never have good answers at all. But I've asked it questions in there, and it rivals anything that I've seen for, I mean, it's like because you can't get it on like Stack Overflow or anything like
Yeah,
that.
because they're
So
trying
it's
to
a
keep
great
it sort of
thing for
proprietary.
that.
And for anyone who doesn't know, Tableau is a market-leading business analytics. Is that correct?
Yes.
It's just absolutely huge. All the corporations are using it for business analytics, and there's a huge skill shortage. And you can get a lot of money if you know how to. And all it is just, I mean, it's just all drag and drop type stuff mostly, right? All these widgets and so forth.
Yeah, it's mostly for creating charts and things like that, but it does do a lot of analytics, and it's probably one of the biggest ones to use for creating graphs and everything for business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess we're at roughly the time we said we would go. Does anyone? We might as well go ahead.
Can we ask a question to the audience?
Yes,
maybe?
please do. Go right ahead.
So, what does the audience think that is going to benefit the most from this exponential rise in artificial intelligence? I can think of, unfortunately, OpenAI is a private company, so you cannot benefit from that, but NVIDIA certainly because of the GPUs, and Microsoft because of their investment in OpenAI and the fact that OpenAI is using Microsoft for the hardware. Can anybody else think of other companies that are going to ride the artificial intelligence besides NVIDIA and Microsoft? And if so, can you tell us why?
Any opinions?
This might be
Go
might
ahead.
be a controversial take, but I've been driving with the Tesla full self-driving beta for about the last 18 months, and seeing the progress of that over the time that I've had access to it is pretty phenomenal. The latest update more or less drives me everywhere with, sometimes it hogs the left lane and I'll make it get over, but otherwise, like, errors and disengagements are getting fewer all the time.
So this is this is the Tesla of Elon Musk that updates itself all the time, constantly. And you agree to that, or do you have any control over it?
Yeah. I mean, I want the latest software because it might be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But like I said, over the last 18 months, the pace of innovation is undeniable in the improvement to that software for, hands-off driving, the car making all decisions, putting on the turn signal, changing lanes, getting on the highway, getting off the highway, avoiding traffic. It drives like a human. So, we've been focused on software. I think this whole talk, if you wanted a quote unquote real world AI example, you could think of them. They're probably a long ways out from the humanoid robot, but self-driving cars are always a year away if you listen to Elon, which you probably shouldn't do, but that's
Do you
just
know
my
what
anecdote.
type of software model they use? Like, are they using neural networks are
Yeah.
they training?
Yeah. Yep.
I see. And do you know if they're using like TensorView or whatever? He's
They
probably using his
have-
own.
They've had multiple hours-long AI day presentations that I would urge anyone to watch if you are at all interested in what Tesla's doing.
And he's
There are-
just formed his own company now too, right? AI.X or whatever it is.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what's going on there. I think Elon put up $100 million to help fund the start of OpenAI. Supposedly,
Yeah, that's right.
with no ownership claims to it, and now they're a private company. So who knows what that's all about? But
Yeah,
as far
well,
as
that's great that you're using, you trust it. You found it possible to trust it, to update itself.
it has avoided at least 3 accidents that I can recall. Almost every time I try to, if it does something and I'm like, oh wait, no, that's wrong, I'll save the dash cam footage and I'll go back and watch, and it was actually right.
Wow. Well, I would just love it because I really don't like driving all that much. So I'd love it if I could get the car to do the driving and take the responsibility.
Just for some insight on that Elon Musk comment on why he started the other AI company, there was a good interview on Fox News with Tucker Carlson a while back, and you can find it on YouTube as well. That I think it's worth listening to. It was a very well done interview, and it explains why he took the eye off the ball on what happened with OpenAI that he invested in, and he's worried that it's not long term, it's going the wrong direction. Something needs to balance it out.
So we could invest in his firm, in AI.X. Or maybe not. I guess it's not listed. Is that right?
Well, I think it's trying to keep it almost as a nonprofit, open, something to keep everything else in check.
We're going to let people have stayed, but we've had a huge persistence of attendance today. People have stayed longer than I've seen for other meetings by a long shot, but we should be fair and let them go unless anyone has any other comments.
I just want to say thanks to everybody. It was a very good session.
Yeah, I have actually one question. So Jose mentioned that about the express genes that we have. So we inherit intelligence and then we build on top of that. So from the ChatGPT 3 to 4, the pre-training, is it done from the scratch or do they build on top of that?
4 starts from scratch again, and it has weeks and weeks of time on the GPU processors. Yes, you have reinforcement learning and with humans, and also the GPT 4 and 3 is learning from every time you go to the browser or even when you use the API. OpenAI is using that for learning, but it's not the same because the important thing is the formation of the connections that is established in the pre-training all at once. You see the What can be done afterwards, it's only has a much less effect than the initial pre-training, because you have to go back to the fact of math abilities arise after 100 billion parameters, right? So
Yes.
you have to have a huge amount, and 100 billion parameters of training, that's not reinforcement learning. That is not anything you can do afterwards. That is the kind of training that you do in pre-training. So any thing which has to do with pattern formations, etc., is mainly done in pre-training.
So in the reinforcement learning, when the word itself means it is learning, it actually doesn't, from whatever it learns in the reinforcement learning phase, it doesn't go back and change any weights or
No, it does by back propagation. By back propagation algorithm, it is reestablishing some connections that have to do with the way that it interprets. This is very important. It has to do with what Dave was talking about, prompt engineering, right? Whenever you are also doing reinforcement learning, don't think that it's interpreting the way that you meant, because it cannot read your mind. So it has its own interpretation of it. And then it reestablishes some of the connections. The problem is twofold. One is that it cannot interpret perfectly what you had in mind. A lot of it has to do with how well you are doing the reinforcement learning. And that can never be perfect, because you cannot perfectly understand what is a black box. And the other problem is you have to think in terms of the parameter space, right? You're using gradient descent in order to optimize and get you the reconnection of the neurons. If you have a global minima that it is like you have a valley that is surrounded by a lot of mountains, and it is a very well established minimum, okay, you're in good shape. But unfortunately, many times you're going to end up with regions which are just local minima, and there is another minima below it. So this is the problem with reinforcement learning. It is using much less data. What it can address has to be interpreted. It will be interpreted incorrectly many times, and what you don't have in mind. And when it establishes the connection, it will not fully satisfy you. And that's why the problem with alignment.
Okay, that's a lot of explanation for important issues. So it's worthwhile. Any other? Well, let's call it a night there. Thank you very much to everybody, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.